A high first-round draft pick making his NFL debut, but should he be on your fantasy bench this week? Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horowitz. Glad to be with you here on the Fantasy Football Series presented by Norton, because every click matters. It's power projections heading into Week 7. Let's bring in our CBSSports.com senior fantasy football writer, Dave Richard. And Dave, rookie I'm talking about, Michael Crabtree. How do you possibly project what he's going to do at Houston here in Week 7?
Well, the first things first, you got to consider the entire offense that they have in San Francisco and the fact that they're a running team. So right off the bat, you can assume that Michael Crabtree is not going to get a lot of catches. We gave him 3 this week, but we do assume that he is going to go and put up a good receiving average, yards per catch. That's what we're talking about here. And we gave him 17.0 yards per catch on the nose. Do the math, that's 51 yards. So figure he'll be good for around 5 fantasy points this week. Offensive coordinator Jimmy Ray says he expects Crabtree to play at least half the snaps, maybe even more, maybe even start, and he's been good at practice this week. But look, the 49ers just don't throw it around that much. I'm sure the Texans are going to be mindful that Crabtree is out there on the field. I guess he has a decent chance of scoring, but you know that the Niners love to run the football. That goes double in the red zone. So Crabtree really, you can't expect big things from him. If he goes and has a big game, at least be happy that you have him on your team, which is why everybody watching right now should go to their waiver wire and see if he's out there and drop a low-end guy in hopes that Crabtree develops into a good option.
Dave, what about his teammate, Frank Gore? He's coming back from the injury, and Houston has only given up 135 rushing yards the last 3 games. Is Gore going to get back to the level that he had in Week 2?
We're thinking he's going to get back to that level, and again, the 49ers are going to give him every chance. We are giving Glenn Coffey some decent stats. We're giving him 9 carries this week, actually, but that doesn't mean anything as far as Frank Gore goes. We think he's going to have a big game. Houston has a hard time stopping the run. And the bottom line is this, Jay. You know that the 49ers are going to have to run the football, kill that clock to keep Matt Schaub off the field. The way Matt Schaub's been playing his lights out, he's got great stats this week, too. Look for Gore to have a big game as well.
Dave, a lot about running backs this week, and here's another one. Cedric Benson talking about some type of revenge against the Chicago Bears. He's coming off a bad performance against that Houston team. What are you projecting for Benson against the 6th best rush defense in the NFL, and that's the Chicago Bears?
Well, we're saying good things are going to happen with Cedric Benson this week, and it's because he's motivated and because he's going to get the ball a lot. We've got him scoring. We've got him totaling over 100 yards in the game. I think that's a safe estimate. Know this, Cincinnati does very well when Cedric Benson gets a lot of carries. And again, the same thing that's going on with Frank Gore against Houston can be said about the Bengals going up against the Bears. The more Cedric Benson runs the ball, the more time ticks off the clock, the more time Jay Cutler is wearing a baseball cap and drinking Gatorade on the sidelines. So Ced Ben, great start this week against Chicago. And I really like the matchup of the Bengals offensive line mashing right into the Bears defensive line. It should be good. Benson should find room to roam.
And that extra motivation, maybe a little bit of a palate taster as well for Cedric Benson. Got to ask you about Clinton Portis. You guys have him rated as the 10th highest fantasy running back this week in terms of fantasy points. But it's Sherman Lewis calling the plays. There's all kinds of turmoil, and he's going up against the Eagles' defense. Where is his confidence in Clinton Portis this week?
Well, a lot of it has to do with his history against Philadelphia. He's had some really strong games against them, including one last year. And no one passes in this series. It's kind of strange, but Donovan McNabb doesn't have good games against Washington. And Jason Campbell, I know Campbell doesn't have good games against anybody, but that goes double against Philadelphia. McNabb, no touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 against the Redskins, and I think Campbell has no touchdowns in 2 of his last 3. Something like that. It's ugly. All the receivers in this game, all the wide receivers anyway, we don't love them. Kind of have to go with Deshaun Jackson, but the running back should be good. That goes for Brian Westbrook, and of course that goes for Portis too. This might be one of the last couple of weeks that Portis will be decent for fantasy. His offensive line is falling apart. He's falling apart a little bit too. So owners that have Portis, expect him to have a good game this week, and then after that, try and trade him. Get him off your roster, get somebody better in there, and help yourself out a little bit, because it's only a matter of time before Portis breaks down behind that offensive line.
And behind that entire offense with all the turmoil going on in Washington. Real quickly, wide receivers, hot names, Sidney Rice, Miles Austin, Austin Collie, Mike Wallace. You're all projecting at least 10 fantasy points for all of them. Which one do you have the confidence in the most, and which one do you have the least confidence in?
It's bizarro world, Jason. I like the rookie who's a slot receiver for the Indianapolis Colts, Austin Collie. Really think he's got a great shot to put up some good numbers in this game. It's hard to cover him. And by doing that, you've got to give attention to Reggie Wayne. You've got to give attention to Dallas Clark. I don't know whether or not Anthony Gonzalez is going to play this week. My guess is that he won't. But Collie will always find single coverage. He runs great routes. Peyton Manning has confidence in him. I expect him to have a big day against St. Louis this week. As for Sidney Rice, we're giving him good numbers, but I think he might actually not do as well as those numbers project. Pittsburgh's secondary is good. Sidney Rice doesn't average nearly as many yards per catch on grass as he does on turf. I think Favre also has a tough day. We might actually bring Sidney Rice's numbers down and maybe all the Vikings' numbers down before kickoff on Sunday.
And that's something we'll have to wait on CBSSports.com and see what happens on fantasy football today this week and see where you guys are on that one because it is a 1 o'clock kickoff. Dave, thank you very much. We'll talk to you on Sunday.
Can't wait for it.
All right, folks, don't forget Fantasy Football Today does come your way every Sunday beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern. That'll do it for Power Projections, part of the CBSSports.com Fantasy Football Series brought to you by Norton because every click matters. For Dave Richard, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care, folks.